My name is Edward Hunt, and I've always believed that emotions were liabilities. My father drilled it into me like a mantra. Control is everything. Let feelings rule, and you fall. I absorbed it, silently, meticulously, though I swore I would never become the man he was. Edward Hunt Sr., my father, was a man of steel. Disciplined, calculated, unyielding. I grew up shadowing his routines, absorbing lessons in patience, strategy, and endurance. Yet, when I married Lucinda, I believed I had left all that behind. She was radiant, full of warmth, with laughter that could break through the darkest mood. I felt privileged to be the man at her side. We had a daughter, Clara. I poured myself into my family, building stability, trying to shield them from the world's cruelty. Even so, my father's imprint lingered within me, subtle, persistent, a ghost of precision and control. 24 years of marriage had brought routine, comfort, predictability. But I was about to discover how swiftly that illusion could shatter. It began on an ordinary August morning. The sun hammered the city relentlessly, but in the office, the day felt manageable. I finished meetings early, closed deals, and decided to return home to surprise Lucinda. Our 25th anniversary approached in days, and I had dreams of a quiet, intimate celebration. I opened the door to the kitchen and froze. Lucinda and Clara sat there, their expressions tense and deliberate. It was as if they had rehearsed every word, every glance. I set down my briefcase and greeted them casually. "Edward," Lucinda said, her voice steady but firm. "Please sit." Clara's eyes flickered with an excitement I didn't understand. "Dad, we need to talk." I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I Saturday, "I'm listening," I said, projecting calm. Lucinda inhaled sharply, avoiding my gaze. "Edward, 25 years soon. I need change. I want something else. I can't stay confined to the life we've known." "Something else?" I asked, tone measured. Clara leaned forward, almost triumphant. "Mom wants an open marriage," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And I think it's great. Everyone does this nowadays. Physical exclusivity doesn't matter. Trust is what counts." I turned to my daughter. The audacity of her words cut deeper than I expected. "You're telling me love is just an app these days?" I thought. Clara nodded, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. Lucinda shifted uncomfortably. "Edward, I need something new. Life feels repetitive, stagnant. I want to experience more, meet new people." A quiet fury simmered inside me, but I forced my face into neutrality. My fingers drummed on the table, an old habit from my army days. "Count, breathe, don't break. This is your plan? You date others, and I what? Sit at home, watch." Clara scoffed. "Dad, you can date too. Nobody's stopping you. Just accept that times have changed. You might need an app, sure, but you'll figure it out." They laughed, a cruel, teasing sound, as if my hesitation were entertainment. I took a long breath, controlled, deliberate. "Is there someone specific?" Lucinda hesitated, then whispered, "It's Michael, the restaurant owner." Clara practically squealed. "Oh my God, Mom, he's perfect." Finally, some excitement. Something inside me tightened. Michael was familiar. I had entertained him at business dinners countless times. Now he was the target of my wife's desires. Yet, outwardly, I remained calm. "I see. And you're both okay with this?" Lucinda nodded reluctantly. "Yes, we signed the prenup, Edward. The house, the terms, everything is clear. I'm serious about this." I leaned back in my chair, letting silence stretch. "Fine, I'll agree. But the conditions are mine. You want freedom? You will live by my rules in my house. If that's unacceptable, you find another life somewhere else." Both women stared, a flicker of apprehension crossing Lucinda's face. Clara tried to laugh it off. "Dad, half of Mom's house is hers legally." Lucinda raised a hand. "Stop, Clara. He's right. The house belongs to Edward. We signed a prenup. We will live by his conditions." I felt a cold clarity settle over me. A strategy forming, precise and methodical. The gauntlet had been thrown. Once challenged, a cornered man can be dangerous. The next day, I met with my lawyer, a sharp mind named Ronald. I laid out a plan. A post-nuptial agreement locking down all claims, property, finances, and even conditions for dating. No partner could enter the house. Michael's presence would not be tolerated. Ronald smirked. "You're going for the jugular," he said. Weeks later, In Ronald's office, Lucinda signed under the scrutiny of her lawyer. She was defiant, but I could see she was blind to the fact that she had just surrendered control. The first week after Lucinda signed the post-nuptial agreement felt surreal. At the office, I moved through my routines with military precision: deals, meetings, phone calls. Outside, however, a new part of me stirred, cold and calculating. Lucinda wasted no time arranging her first date with Michael. Clara, of course, cheered her on, teasing me about my old-fashioned ways, mocking me at dinner, and suggesting I try online dating. I listened silently, the silence a weapon more potent than any argument. The day of her date arrived. I had already set my plan into motion. If Lucinda wanted Michael, I decided I would test the limits of this open marriage. Michael had a daughter, Emily, a bright and independent 22-year-old. I invited her to accompany me to a charity gala, a carefully orchestrated display. Emily accepted, curious and bold. She had no patience for her father's arrogance, and she knew exactly who I was. The night unfolded smoothly. Emily was elegant, poised, intelligent. We laughed, conversed, and turned heads, not for scandal, but for the statement it made. Lucinda and Clara would soon realize that their assumptions about me were entirely wrong. The next morning, the fallout began. Clara stormed into the living room, furious, fists clenched. "You took Michael's daughter out? Are you insane?" I shrugged, calmly removing my jacket. "A consenting adult. She wanted to go. I'm not restricted from doing the same thing you demanded your mother be allowed to do." Clara's face twisted in outrage. "She's my age. You can't." I cut her off, calm, cold. "So age is just a number when it's your mother, but unacceptable when it's me? Interesting double standard." She stormed away, fuming, leaving me in quiet satisfaction. Lucinda, pale and tense, left for errands without inviting confrontation. The first signs of tension in her posture were subtle but unmistakable. She understood that the rules she had requested now applied equally. Days turned into a tense rhythm. Lucinda's demeanor grew fragile. She spent long hours alone, occasionally rummaging through old photographs, tears silently slipping down her cheeks. One afternoon, she cornered me on the back porch. Her eyes were red, her body thin and frail. "Edward, I've been seeing doctors," she whispered, her voice fragile. I haven't been feeling well." Her appearance startled me. She looked skeletal, the bones on her shoulders pronounced. "Doctors?" I asked. "Yes. I tested positive for an STD," she admitted, crimson-faced. "I contracted it from Michael. I'm on medication. It's treatable, but humiliating. I hope you're happy. You got your revenge." Something twitched inside me, a pang of guilt or pity, but I held my voice steady. "I'm not happy, Lucinda. This is a consequence of your choice. You asked for this. You wanted an open marriage. You acted. I simply enforced the reality you requested." Tears ran down her cheeks. "You hate me." I didn't answer. I let the autumn wind swirl around us as I walked inside, leaving her standing there, broken and diminished by her own decisions. Clara's defiance continued. She returned weeks later, outraged over unpaid bills, car leases, and student loans. "Dad, you can't just leave me to suffer," she yelled. I looked at her coldly. "I told you. You and your mother made your choices. You faced the consequences. I'm done funding irresponsibility and disloyalty." She recoiled, stunned. "You're cruel." I simply replied, "I'm following logic. Mom is free. You are free. You wanted modern freedom. Here it is. Live with it." Lucinda tried to intervene, attempting to mediate. "Edward, please. Stop this. She's my daughter. Don't punish her." I turned to her, unflinching. "I am not punishing anyone. I am not rewarding disloyalty. This is the outcome you chose. You opened the door. I'm merely walking through it." Lucinda's fists clenched, her voice trembling. "If that's how you treat Clara, fine. But us, can we talk?" "Civility." I shook my head. 2 weeks ago, you asked for an open marriage. I said yes, under conditions you agreed to. Nothing has changed." Tears welled in her eyes. I can't handle this anymore. Seeing you with her, it's unbearable. Can we go back? Just be a couple again?" I stared, resolute. "No. You opened the door. You keep it open. The man you married, the one you knew, is gone. There's no turning back." She sank onto the couch, defeated, whispering, "You've become so hateful." Where's the man I loved? That man died the day you asked for an open marriage. I said simply, voice devoid of sympathy, and walked away. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of this new life settled into a tense normality. Lucinda avoided the house whenever possible, her presence marked only by silent glances through windows or hushed phone calls. Clara, reluctantly learning the weight of responsibility, began juggling work and bills, each failure teaching her a hard lesson in independence. Meanwhile, my focus shifted entirely to Emily. What began as a calculated move to mirror Lucinda's audacity transformed into something more genuine. She was intelligent, sharp, and far from naive. Our conversations flowed easily, ranging from business strategy to art and fashion. She challenged me, not only intellectually but emotionally. One evening, as we walked through the city streets after a charity gala, Emily's hand brushed mine. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the electricity between us was undeniable. "You know," she said, "I never expected to find someone like you in this chaos." I smiled faintly. Chaos tends to find me, and I tend to adapt. She laughed softly, a sound that cut through the tension I'd carried for years. "And yet you maintain control. I admire that, even if it's terrifying." Terrifying. Perhaps she was right. The years of strict discipline, the shadow of my father's expectations, the careful calculations of a life spent preparing for every contingency. It all coalesced into a person both feared and respected. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't recoil. She simply observed and met me on my own terms. As weeks turned into months, I realized the stakes had changed. The connection with Emily deepened, our interactions increasingly intimate. I began spending evenings at her apartment, sharing stories of my military past, my regrets, and my visions for the future. She listened without judgment, without exploiting the vulnerabilities I revealed. For the first time in decades, I felt a sense of trust, of genuine partnership. Then, one evening, as we shared a quiet dinner at her apartment, she hesitated, her fork hovering midair. "Edward, I need to tell you something," she said, voice low. I set my glass down, attentive. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," she whispered, eyes wide, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. The world seemed to pause. My chest tightened, my mind raced through possibilities, fears, and an unfamiliar surge of joy. "How far along?" I asked, my voice measured despite the turmoil within. "About 8 weeks," she said. "You're the father, obviously. I want to keep this child, if you're willing to be involved." I stared at her, absorbing the gravity of her words. Shock, apprehension, and a strange flicker of happiness collided within me. After decades of calculating and controlling, life had presented a situation I could not simply engineer away. I want this child," I said finally. "We'll do this together. We'll make it right." No bitterness, no shadows from the past. Her eyes filled with relief, and she smiled. A real, unguarded smile. "Thank you. That means everything." From that night onward, everything shifted. The connection with Emily became more profound, more anchored in reality than my decades of experience with Lucinda had ever been. Parenthood, for the first time, seemed possible on my terms. The chaos of the past months faded slightly, replaced by a renewed purpose, a life I was finally willing to shape for myself and this new family. Yet, the shadow of Lucinda and Clara lingered. The consequences of their choices continued to ripple outward, reminding me that freedom, once granted, could never be fully reversed. And in the quiet moments, I wondered if they had truly understood the price of the desires they had unleashed. The tension at home reached a new peak as the ripple effects of Lucinda and Clara's choices became impossible to ignore. Clara's temporary bursts of anger and frustration were replaced by a constant weariness, her youthful confidence eroded by the harsh reality of adulthood. The bills she had once ignored now screamed for attention. Rent, utilities, car payments, student loans, all relentless reminders of her dependency. Lucinda, on the other hand, seemed almost fragile. Her once proud posture had slumped, and shadows lined her face, the weight of her own decisions etched in every movement. She wandered through the house like a ghost, seemingly searching for a past that no longer existed. Her trips out were infrequent, often ending with her return clutching receipts and empty promises. I watched, silently, noting every misstep, every falter. There was no joy in this, only the cold satisfaction of clarity. Lucinda had believed she could defy the rules, bend reality to her whims, and maintain the illusion of control. Clara had supported her, thinking that their modern ideals of freedom shielded them from accountability. Reality, however, was unyielding. One morning, Clara stormed into the kitchen, eyes wild. "Dad, this is ridiculous. Mom is miserable. You can't just sit there and let her suffer." I set my coffee down carefully, meeting her gaze. "I am not causing her suffering, Clara. She chose this path. She created these consequences. I am simply observing reality." Her face twisted in confusion and frustration. "Reality? Mom is sick. You're letting her spiral." I rose, my tone steady, unyielding. "She is responsible for her health, just as you are responsible for yours. I cannot control the choices you, or your mother, made." Clara's fists clenched. "You're heartless." "Perhaps," I said calmly, "but I am fair. The fairness lies in acknowledging the results of actions taken freely." Meanwhile, the life I was building with Emily and the unborn child provided a stark contrast to the chaos left behind. Emily was the calm in the storm, a partner in thought and in life. Her pregnancy brought both excitement and anxiety, but every challenge felt surmountable with her by my side. I found myself planning meticulously: healthcare, finances, and the establishment of a stable home. Each decision, each step, was designed not just to protect, but to nurture the new life growing inside her. Lucinda, sensing my detachment, tried to reach me on her own terms. One afternoon, she appeared on the back porch, pale and trembling. "Edward, I need to talk," she said softly. I studied her carefully. "About what?" I've been sick," she admitted. "Doctors, they said it's treatable, but humiliating." It came from him. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I said nothing, simply listening. She continued, "I want you to understand. I regret everything. I never wanted to hurt you or Clara. Lucinda," I interrupted gently but firmly, "you have your consequences. I am not celebrating them, nor am I punishing you. You asked for freedom. You got it. Now you must live with it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded, understanding that no apologies could undo the choices she had made. For the first time, I saw the depth of accountability she now faced. As the days turned into weeks, Clara began to stabilize. The harshness of responsibility forced a transformation. She found work, managed her finances, and slowly regained a sense of self-reliance. While our relationship remained strained, I observed a glimmer of growth that I hadn't expected, a testament to the harsh lessons life had imposed. Meanwhile, Emily's pregnancy progressed, and I remained committed to providing a secure, loving environment. The anticipation of fatherhood reshaped me, forcing reflection on past mistakes and solidifying the desire to break patterns of bitterness and detachment. With Emily, I learned the delicate balance of authority, care, and partnership. Yet, beneath this new life, I remained vigilant. Lucinda and Clara's actions had left scars, emotional, financial, and relational. I knew the remnants of this chaos would linger, shaping interactions and expectations for years to come. The lesson was stark: choices have consequences, and freedom without accountability is a dangerous illusion. In the quiet moments, watching Emily cradle her growing belly or Clara struggle yet persist in her newfound independence, I understood the full measure of responsibility. Life could be cruel, chaotic, and unpredictable, but it could also be shaped, carefully, deliberately, into something better. And I intended to ensure that my new family, unlike my old one, would thrive despite the mistakes of the past. The following weeks were a study in controlled chaos. Lucinda's condition worsened slowly but unmistakably, a constant reminder of the consequences she had brought upon herself. Each doctor's visit confirmed the same uncomfortable reality. The illness was treatable, yes, but lingering complications meant her life would no longer resemble the one she once had. Clara, now confronted with the stark responsibility of adulthood, oscillated between defiance and pragmatism. She found a part-time job at a local boutique while continuing her online studies. Yet, the smallest financial strain, missed deadlines, a rent increase, an unexpected bill, sent her spiraling into frustration. She tried, repeatedly, to reach me with excuses or emotional appeals, but I maintained the boundary I had established. I would not bail her out. Emily, by contrast, became a grounding force. Her calm demeanor and pragmatic approach to the pregnancy offered a stark contrast to the turbulence that haunted my former household. We spent long evenings discussing finances, childcare, and the values we intended to instill in our child. For the first time in years, I felt the power of stability, the quiet, unyielding strength of a partnership built on mutual respect rather than obligation or revenge. One afternoon, I returned home to find Lucinda slumped in the living room, her energy visibly drained. Her face was pale, eyes sunken, and her once vibrant posture had become frail. "Edward, we need to talk," she whispered, barely audible. I approached cautiously. "Talk about what?" She drew a shaky breath. "The doctors, they said the infection has caused some complications. I might need surgery. And they warned that there could be lasting effects." I nodded silently. There was no immediate anger or judgment, only observation. I had already accounted for the consequences. Now I merely watched her navigate them. "Then you follow their advice. You manage your care. That is your responsibility." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I never meant for any of this. I thought I could have freedom and still keep us intact." "You miscalculated," I said softly. "Freedom without responsibility is an illusion. You have learned that lesson, painfully." Meanwhile, Clara struggled with her newfound independence. A late rent notice arrived, and she confronted me in the kitchen, frustration boiling over. "Dad, I can't handle this. Mom's falling apart, and now I'm supposed to manage everything on my own." I looked up from my laptop. "Clara, you are an adult. You chose to side with your mother. Now you must face the outcomes. If you cannot manage, the solution is not to appeal to me, but to find alternative resources or work harder." But this isn't fair," she protested, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "Fairness is irrelevant. Life is about choices and consequences. You've learned that firsthand. Now, implement what you've learned." Her lips trembled, and she stormed out, but the lesson had taken root. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to navigate the world on her own terms, and I observed her growth with a detached satisfaction. Amid this turbulence, Emily's pregnancy advanced smoothly. I found a profound purpose in preparing for Kevin's arrival. From arranging the nursery to attending prenatal appointments, every detail mattered. I felt a new sense of accountability, not the cold, analytical responsibility I had wielded with my old family, but a deep, emotional commitment to nurture, protect, and provide. However, tension remained. Lucinda's sporadic visits and phone calls reminded me of the unresolved history that lingered like a shadow. Occasionally, I would receive messages from Clara, frustrated or panicked about some minor crisis. And despite my best efforts to remain detached, I felt a flicker of guilt, an echo of the father I could have been, the man I once promised to protect both mother and daughter. But Emily's presence and Kevin's anticipated birth offered balance. Life had fractured around me, yet I had built a new framework, one based not on blind loyalty or emotional submission, but on deliberate, considered actions. I was learning that control and empathy could coexist, that responsibility and affection could form a foundation stronger than either alone. Then, one late evening, an unexpected message arrived from Lucinda's doctor. She had been hospitalized due to complications. I read the short note carefully, noting the urgency, but also the clarity. Intervention was needed. For a moment, I felt the faintest pang, a reminder that despite her choices, she was still human, still vulnerable. Emily noticed my momentary pause. "Everything okay?" she asked softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Yes," I said firmly, regaining composure. "I'll manage it." And I did. I contacted the hospital, clarified details, ensured her care, but I made no personal visits. My responsibility was oversight, not emotional indulgence. The lesson, I reminded myself, was the same. Consequences could not be erased, only managed. In the weeks that followed, Lucinda stabilized but remained weak. Clara, now juggling work and school, developed resilience. Emily and I prepared for Kevin, deepening our connection and solidifying the new family structure. And through it all, the echo of past mistakes lingered, a reminder that while revenge and justice could be measured, life itself remained unpredictable. I realized something essential. The past could shape us, but it need not define us. The chaos I had endured with Lucinda and Clara had forged in me a keen understanding of boundaries, responsibility, and the delicate interplay between freedom and consequence. Kevin's first kick reminded me of why every decision mattered. Life demanded vigilance, planning, and unwavering commitment, not just to oneself, but to those who depended on us. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it. Lucinda's hospitalization marked a turning point, both physically and emotionally. The doctors were candid. Without proper rest and adherence to treatment, her complications could worsen, potentially leading to permanent damage. She was fragile, both in body and in the carefully constructed pride she had always wielded like armor. I remained in contact with the hospital, ensuring she followed every prescribed protocol. Despite her frailty, Lucinda attempted to assert control, insisting on making decisions that clearly exceeded her capacity. Each call she made was tinged with defensiveness. "I can manage this on my own," she said one afternoon, voice strained but sharp. "You cannot," I replied calmly. "You need support. This is not about pride or independence. This is about consequences and survival." Clara, for the first time, had to step fully into adulthood. Between her part-time job and online classes, she now handled bills, coordinated with doctors, and even mediated arguments between her mother and me. The stress was immense, but with each challenge, she grew more capable, more self-reliant. I saw glimpses of maturity in her that had been hidden under teenage rebellion. Meanwhile, Emily continued to be my anchor. Her patience, wisdom, and calm presence contrasted sharply with the chaos Lucinda and Clara brought. Preparing for Kevin's birth became a shared mission, assembling the nursery, reviewing pediatric options, and attending prenatal appointments together. Every action strengthened our partnership and underscored the lessons I had learned about responsibility and trust. Then, one evening, Lucinda requested a visit at the hospital. Clara, exhausted and anxious, hesitated but ultimately agreed to accompany her mother. I knew the encounter would be difficult, but I also recognized its potential as a final reckoning. The hospital room was quiet when we arrived. Lucinda lay in bed, pale and fragile, yet her eyes still burned with defiance. "You think you've won, Edward," she whispered, voice weak. "But you'll never be free of me." I remained composed, speaking slowly and clearly. "I am free, Lucinda. You are the one trapped by your choices, by the consequences of your actions, and by the illnesses you ignored until they forced your hand. This is the reality you created." Clara, standing beside her mother, spoke for the first time with authority. "Mom, stop. Stop pretending you're in control. Look at yourself. You've hurt Dad, you've hurt me, and now you're hurting yourself. We need honesty, not excuses." Lucinda's gaze shifted, flickering between anger and shame. I didn't realize," she began, but the words faltered. For the first time, the carefully constructed mask of superiority slipped, revealing vulnerability she had long hidden. "You did realize," I said softly, yet firmly. "And you chose differently. Every choice has a consequence. You are living them now." The tension in the room was thick, but Clara's words had cut through the fog. Lucinda's shoulders slumped, and for the first time in years, she seemed small, humbled, and entirely human. That night, after leaving the hospital, Clara turned to me. "It's hard," she admitted, voice quiet. "Seeing her like that. I don't want to resent her, but I also don't want to go back to how things were." "You won't," I reassured her. "You've learned a critical lesson about responsibility, boundaries, and self-reliance. Your mother's choices shaped this, but they do not define you." Emily held my hand, offering silent support. "You've built something different now, something stronger. She can't take that away from you." In the days that followed, Lucinda's condition stabilized, but the consequences of her actions remained. Clara grew more independent, managing responsibilities that had once overwhelmed her. And as I watched Emily prepare for Kevin's arrival, I understood that life's lessons were often painful, but survival, growth, and love could emerge even from the most chaotic circumstances. The chapter of revenge and betrayal was closing, replaced by a new one: accountability, resilience, and the delicate balance of family rebuilt on trust and respect. The weeks following Lucinda's hospitalization were tense, but they brought clarity. Each day seemed like a careful negotiation between past mistakes and future intentions. Lucinda's health required constant attention, yet I remained firm on boundaries. No more manipulations, no more exploiting my goodwill, no more attempts to destabilize the family I was rebuilding. Clara adapted quickly to the new reality. She managed household bills, helped her mother with medications, and coordinated Kevin's care whenever Emily and I had to attend work obligations. One evening, I watched her tally the household budget with precise focus, a stack of papers in front of her. Her growth was visible not just in her actions, but in her demeanor. She spoke with authority, yet tempered with empathy. "I've learned a lot," she admitted, noticing my gaze, "about responsibility and about what it means to have consequences." "You've learned well," I said. "Now, you can shape your own path. Don't wait for someone else to fix your problems." Lucinda, for her part, began to grasp the repercussions of her choices more fully. The hospital stay forced her into moments of introspection she had long avoided. She could no longer rely on charm or manipulation to escape discomfort. She had to face the reality she had created: estranged relationships, lingering illness, and a family that had learned to operate without her control. One evening, she approached me in the living room. Seated carefully on the couch, her hands were folded, and her voice trembled slightly. "Edward, I know I've made mistakes," she said quietly. "I'm trying to change. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to do better." I studied her, measuring my response. "Change is possible," I said finally, "but it requires more than words. It requires action, respecting boundaries, taking responsibility, and refraining from repeating past errors." "I understand," she whispered. Meanwhile, Emily and I continued to prepare for Kevin's arrival. Each small task, assembling the crib, organizing baby supplies, attending prenatal checkups, was a reminder of what stability and partnership could achieve. Emily's calm guidance balanced my rigid tendencies, creating a household grounded in mutual respect and care. One afternoon, as I returned from a short trip to the office, Clara intercepted me at the door. Her eyes were alert and her tone determined. "Dad, I think I'm ready," she said. "Ready to apply for my own apartment. I want to start paying my own rent and managing my life independently. I know it'll be tough, but I need to do this." I studied her carefully, impressed. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes," she said firmly. "I've learned enough here to manage. I just need the chance to stand on my own." I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and relief. "Very well. I'll support you through the transition, but the responsibility will be yours. No shortcuts, no excuses." "Understood," she replied. Lucinda observed all of this quietly, often from her room or the couch, her presence a reminder of the consequences of failed choices. Her initial resentment toward Clara and me had softened, replaced by a tentative recognition that control was no longer hers to wield. The household's dynamic had shifted, and she had to adapt or remain isolated. The arrival of Kevin drew our focus fully. His cries, his small hands, and his emerging personality reminded us all of the fragility and beauty of life. Emily and I took turns feeding, changing, and comforting him, forming a rhythm that became the heartbeat of our renewed family. Clara, though living separately now, visited often, helping with the baby and bridging the gap between past turmoil and a stable future. Lucinda, while still physically fragile, began participating in care under strict supervision. Her pride occasionally clashed with necessity, but over time she accepted guidance. Small gestures of accountability, measured apologies, and compliance with treatment became her new normal. Through it all, the lessons were clear. Choices carry consequences, resilience can emerge from adversity, and love, real love, is grounded in respect, honesty, and mutual responsibility. By the end of the chapter, the family, though forever altered, began finding its equilibrium. The chaos of betrayal, revenge, and illness had given way to a structured, disciplined environment. Each member now understood their role, their boundaries, and their capacity for growth. And while the scars of the past remained, they served as constant reminders. Life could be rebuilt, but only through accountability, effort, and genuine care. The first morning Clara moved into her new apartment was quiet, almost eerily so. The house felt emptier without her constant presence, yet there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. I helped her carry the last box of personal items up the narrow staircase, noting how she handled everything with determination. No complaints, no hesitation, just resolve. "This is it," she said, placing her keys on the table. "I'm on my own now." I studied her, feeling a mixture of pride and caution. "Remember, Clara, independence comes with responsibility. Mistakes will happen, but the measure of growth is how you handle them. No blaming others." "I understand, Dad," she said, her voice firm. "I want to do this right." As she settled in, I returned home to find Lucinda quietly observing the now empty space Clara had occupied. The absence of her daughter seemed to unsettle her, though she didn't vocalize it. I chose to ignore her initial tension, focusing instead on the household routines that now revolved around Kevin and Emily. Kevin's presence was a grounding force. Every morning, his cries drew me from sleep, his tiny fingers grasping mine as I held him close. Feeding him, changing him, and soothing him became the rhythm of my life, replacing the chaos of the past months with structured, purposeful activity. Emily handled the nights, ensuring I could maintain some semblance of work-life balance. Together, we functioned as a team, our mutual respect creating an environment Kevin could thrive in. Lucinda's role in the household shifted. She could no longer rely on intimidation or manipulation. Her every action was now scrutinized, guided by necessity. She followed strict schedules for medications, hygiene, and rest. Occasionally, she tried to argue or resist, but I remained firm. "Lucinda," I said one evening as she lingered near Kevin's crib, "you will comply with the rules. Any deviation will have immediate consequences." Her eyes, red from tears or exhaustion, met mine. "I know," she whispered. It was a pivotal moment, submission not out of fear, but out of recognition of her own limitations. Slowly, she began participating in caring for Kevin, learning the routines, understanding the responsibilities, and witnessing firsthand the effort required to maintain a family. Meanwhile, Clara was navigating her new life with growing confidence. She balanced work and personal responsibilities, managing her finances and learning the hard lessons independence demanded. Phone calls home became less frequent, her voice steadier and more self-assured. One weekend, she visited to help with Kevin. She moved with the same decisiveness as she did in her own apartment, her maturity evident in how she approached every task. "Dad," she said while assembling a baby gate, "I've realized something. Being on my own isn't just about money or independence. It's about understanding limits, respecting others, and facing consequences without resentment." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Exactly. You're learning the right lessons. I'm proud of you." Lucinda, observing from a corner, let out a sigh. Her presence no longer dominated the room. She had been reduced to a participant in a world she once tried to control. The power dynamics had shifted, and she felt the sting of consequences keenly. Over the following weeks, the rhythm of the household solidified. Kevin grew stronger and more active, his laughter filling rooms that once echoed with tension. Emily and I managed the daily demands of parenthood with a newfound appreciation for patience and teamwork. Clara continued to flourish in her independence, visiting periodically and offering support without dependency. Lucinda, meanwhile, faced the repercussions of her prior choices daily, from limited mobility and health concerns to the realization that her influence over the family had dramatically waned. The lessons were clear. Independence required effort, accountability, and respect. Attempting to control or manipulate others resulted in isolation and hardship. And above all, true stability emerged not from power or revenge, but from consistent actions, careful planning, and mutual respect. By the end of Chapter 8, the household had found a fragile equilibrium. Every member had their role, every boundary was enforced, and the past, though present in memory, was no longer dictating daily life. Kevin thrived, Clara had grown into her independence, and Lucinda was learning that actions have consequences, no matter how long they evade immediate detection. Life had settled into a rhythm that was predictable, if not entirely easy. Kevin was growing, a small whirlwind of energy, curiosity, and laughter. Clara was thriving in her independence, visiting occasionally, but standing firmly in her new life. I, too, had adapted, balancing work, parenting, and keeping a careful eye on Lucinda. Yet beneath the surface, subtle tensions began to resurface, small ripples hinting at larger consequences yet to come. Lucinda had grown quieter in her actions, but the resentment in her eyes never fully faded. She followed the household rules out of necessity, not remorse. Each time she moved slowly, forgot a task, or hesitated with Kevin, it was a reminder to her that control was no longer hers to wield. One evening, I returned from the office to find Lucinda standing by the kitchen window, gazing out without a word. Kevin was playing on the floor, absorbed in stacking colorful blocks. "You've been quiet today," I remarked, keeping my voice neutral. She turned slowly, her expression guarded. "I'm just thinking," she said softly. "About?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "About everything," she murmured. How quickly things changed. How unexpected this all became. I didn't answer immediately. There was truth in her words. Life had indeed shifted dramatically, and much of it stemmed from choices made years ago. But the difference now was that those choices had consequences she could no longer escape. "Lucinda," I finally said, "your role here is simple. Care for Kevin when needed, follow the house rules, and respect boundaries. Everything else is optional." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. There was a pause, a tense silence that hung heavily in the room. Kevin toppled his block tower with a loud crash, breaking the momentary stillness. I smiled at him, shaking my head. "Focus, little man," I said. He giggled, oblivious to the tension that lingered above him. Meanwhile, Clara had been making strides in her career, balancing freelance projects with her part-time job. Her maturity was evident in how she managed challenges independently. But independence, as she was learning, carried its own burdens. Financial pressures, work-related stress, and the challenge of building a life from scratch tested her resilience daily. One weekend, she arrived with a suitcase and a determined expression. "I've decided to stay a few days," she said, setting her bag down. "I want to help with Kevin and see how things are going." Her presence was comforting, but also a reminder of her growth and newfound autonomy. She moved through the house with purpose, checking on Kevin, helping with meals, and discussing plans for the coming weeks. I watched, silently noting the stark contrast between her maturity and Lucinda's lingering fragility. Later that evening, as Kevin slept, Clara and I spoke quietly in the living room. "You've built something stable here," she said, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and concern. "But Mom still hasn't changed. She's still Lucinda." "I know," I replied. "She's learning the hard way. Consequences aren't easy, but they're necessary." Clara nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you? You've changed too, Dad. You're different now." I allowed myself a faint smile. "I've learned that revenge and control can only go so far. Stability comes from boundaries, yes, but also from patience, foresight, and understanding who you can trust." The next morning brought the first ripple of what was to come. Lucinda had attempted to prepare breakfast, but a misstep with the stove led to a minor kitchen fire. Nothing serious, but it was enough to trigger alarm. Kevin was unharmed, but the smell of smoke and the panic it induced reminded everyone that oversight was still necessary. "Lucinda," I said firmly, "this is why we follow the rules. A lapse can have consequences, not just for you, but for everyone in this house. Understand?" She nodded, subdued. "Yes, I understand." Over the following weeks, small incidents like this reminded me that while progress had been made, it was fragile. Clara's independence and Lucinda's forced compliance existed side by side, creating a delicate balance in the household. Kevin thrived amidst the structure, unaware of the subtle tension that lingered above him like a shadow. I realized then that life was rarely about absolute victories or total control. It was about navigating consequences, understanding human nature, and knowing when to assert authority and when to step back. The lessons Clara and Lucinda were learning were not identical, but both were crucial. One learned independence through effort and responsibility. The other learned consequences through constraint and limitation. The weeks following the kitchen incident passed in tense equilibrium. Kevin thrived in his small universe of toys, laughter, and structured days, oblivious to the undercurrents that defined the adult world around him. Clara continued her visits, helping with homework, dinner, and conversation that sometimes skirted the edges of family tension but always carried warmth. Lucinda, on the other hand, was increasingly withdrawn, her previous defiance replaced with a brittle compliance that barely masked resentment. One evening, a letter arrived, addressed to Lucinda in crisp, official handwriting. She tore it open with shaking hands, scanning the contents. Her face immediately paled, and her composure cracked. I noticed her distress, but I waited silently, observing how she handled the shock. "What is it?" I asked calmly. "It's from the hospital," she stammered, voice tight. They found something." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, maintaining my neutral demeanor. "Found what?" She swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze. "It's an infection, sexually transmitted. I got it from James." The words hung in the air, stark and unyielding. I said nothing at first, letting the weight of consequence settle in. Lucinda's face reflected both fear and humiliation. She had acted impulsively, disregarding boundaries, and now faced tangible repercussions. "I'm on medication," she whispered. "It's treatable, but humiliating. I just wanted you to know." I nodded slowly, controlling my expression. "This is what happens when you make reckless choices," I said evenly. "You asked for an open arrangement. You ignored the consequences, and now you're facing them." Lucinda's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. You're happy now, aren't you? This is your revenge, isn't it?" I shook my head. "Not happy, just realistic. Choices have consequences. You wanted freedom, now you must bear responsibility." For a moment, she seemed to shrink under the weight of my words. Kevin's laughter echoed faintly from the living room, a reminder of innocence and life continuing regardless of adult mistakes. Lucinda wiped at her tears angrily, muttering under her breath, "You're a monster." "I'm not a monster," I said calmly. "I'm simply enforcing the reality that you helped create. Actions have repercussions. You asked for an open marriage, and you are experiencing the outcome. There is no reward for recklessness." Days turned into weeks, and Lucinda's health slowly improved with treatment. But the emotional toll lingered. She became quieter, more introspective, and for the first time, she began to understand the gravity of her choices. Clara, observing from the sidelines, reinforced the contrast between maturity and impulsiveness. She continued her independent life, building stability and earning respect for her responsibility and effort. One afternoon, Lucinda approached me cautiously. "Jonathan, can we talk?" she asked, voice tentative. I studied her for a moment before nodding. "Speak. I understand now. I made mistakes. I hurt people, myself, Kevin, everyone," she admitted, tears brimming again. "I want to try to fix things, to be better." I allowed a faint nod. Acknowledging mistakes is the first step. Redemption is possible, but it must be earned through action, not words. Lucinda swallowed, nodding, finally grasping the boundaries she had long ignored. The path ahead was uncertain, but there was a glimmer of recognition in her eyes, a willingness to face consequences and attempt growth. Meanwhile, Clara's presence remained a stabilizing force. She helped Kevin with schoolwork, encouraged healthy routines, and reminded both Lucinda and me that life continued, demanding accountability and maturity. Lucinda's world outside the house began to reflect the chaos she had sown inside it. Her friends, once amused by her tales of rebellion, now regarded her with a mix of pity and judgment. Invitations to social events became sparse. The excitement of newfound freedom had evaporated, replaced by awkwardness and tension. Rumors traveled fast, and she found herself at the center of quiet whispers. Her choices and their consequences no longer private but public. At school, she felt eyes on her wherever she went. Some classmates avoided her, uncomfortable with the dramatic fallout from her family scandal. Others whispered with a mix of fascination and scorn, piecing together fragments of stories they barely understood. Lucinda felt isolated, a sensation entirely unfamiliar for someone who had long considered herself the social center of her world. Meanwhile, her personal finances spiraled. The leased car she had once flaunted became a daily reminder of mismanagement. Credit card bills piled up, and part-time jobs offered little relief. She had to face the reality she had never experienced before. Independence meant responsibility. Each decision had a cost, and there was no safety net to cushion her fall. At home, tension simmered. Clara's presence remained a gentle, constant reminder that life was structured differently for those who acted with foresight. Kevin's innocence, thriving amid his toys and art supplies, stood in stark contrast to Lucinda's adult struggles. The boy's laughter reminded her daily that life continued, and she had to find her footing or be left behind. One Saturday, she returned home early from her part-time job, face pale and drawn. I noticed her hesitation at the door, but said nothing, letting her actions speak. She slumped into the living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Jonathan," she began, voice weak, almost breaking. I can't keep doing this. Everything is falling apart. I don't know what to do." I regarded her calmly. "You've made choices that led here. No one forced you. The path is yours to navigate. You either learn or continue falling. Your problems aren't excuses for defiance." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I didn't think it would be this bad. I thought I could handle it." "You underestimated reality," I said evenly. "Life doesn't bend for whims or social experiments. Responsibility is relentless." Lucinda wiped her face, trying to regain composure. "And what about Mom?" she asked, voice quivering. She's sick, and I feel guilty." I nodded slowly. "Actions have consequences. You were part of her decisions. You cannot erase what's done, but you can choose how you move forward." For the first time, Lucinda absorbed the weight of her choices fully. It wasn't just the open marriage, the public humiliation, or the financial strain. It was the reality that her impulsive actions had hurt multiple people, including herself. Days later, she began seeking solutions. She applied for more stable jobs, cut unnecessary expenses, and started to slowly rebuild her reputation. At home, she engaged more meaningfully with Kevin, helping him with homework and listening attentively to his stories, realizing that nurturing others could be rewarding in ways her self-centered pursuits never were. Clara continued to guide her subtly, offering advice without judgment, teaching her patience, planning, and accountability. Slowly, Lucinda's demeanor shifted. Pride gave way to humility, impulsiveness to thoughtfulness. Though the scars of past mistakes remained, she started to understand that maturity wasn't about avoiding consequences. It was about facing them and learning to navigate life responsibly. Lucinda's growing awareness of responsibility extended into her relationships. The flirtations she once pursued with reckless abandon now seemed hollow and self-serving. Friends she had manipulated for amusement or convenience began to drift away, leaving only those who demanded sincerity. Her attempts at casual dating ended awkwardly. She discovered that charm alone could no longer shield her from accountability. One evening, she came home visibly shaken, clutching her phone tightly. "Jonathan," she began, voice low. I made a mistake. I tried to contact someone from school, but it blew up. I didn't realize how reckless I was." I raised an eyebrow, my expression neutral. "Reckless behavior carries consequences, Lucinda. Have you reflected on why you felt the need to act without considering others?" She swallowed hard. I I guess I wanted attention. I thought it would prove something about me, about control. But it backfired." I nodded slowly. "And what did it teach you?" "That actions have weight," she admitted. "And that people can be hurt by thoughtless choices. Even if I thought it was harmless. It wasn't." The truth of her words hung in the room, heavy but necessary. I said nothing further, letting her internalize the lesson. Over the next few weeks, Lucinda began to approach her social life differently. She reached out to friends she had wronged, offering sincere apologies instead of excuses. While not all relationships healed, some slowly mended. She learned that honesty, accountability, and respect were far more valuable than fleeting admiration or manipulative games. Meanwhile, Clara continued to observe silently, stepping in only when necessary. She encouraged Lucinda to pursue hobbies and interests that didn't rely on others' validation: painting, volunteering, and mentoring younger kids at the community center. Lucinda began to realize that fulfillment wasn't tied to manipulation or rebellion, but to growth and contribution. At home, interactions with Kevin became a foundation for her personal development. His curiosity, innocence, and unwavering trust required her to respond thoughtfully. She found herself taking pride in guiding him, helping with school projects, and even teaching him small lessons about responsibility and empathy. Slowly, she began to internalize the principle that nurturing others was more rewarding than seeking fleeting thrills. Lucinda also began to understand the complexity of adult romantic relationships. Observing my calm, measured approach with Maria highlighted the difference between impulsive attraction and sustainable partnership. Maria's steadiness, patience, and respect contrasted sharply with Lucinda's previous chaotic choices. In quiet moments, Lucinda reflected on the mistakes of her mother and herself, realizing that mutual respect, trust, and communication were non-negotiable pillars in any meaningful relationship. One night, she stayed up late, journaling her thoughts. She wrote about the humiliation she had witnessed, the chaos she had participated in, and the painful lessons learned. But she also wrote about hope, the possibility of changing her patterns, of growing beyond mistakes, of building a life guided by accountability rather than impulse. Lucinda's newfound awareness was soon put to the test. College life offered both freedom and responsibility, a combination she had previously handled poorly. The safety net of her family's money and indulgence was no longer guaranteed. She was responsible for her own rent, tuition installments, and daily expenses. Every decision carried weight, every misstep a consequence she could no longer delegate. Her first real challenge came in the form of a group project. Assigned to work with peers she barely knew, Lucinda quickly realized that charm and superficial cooperation weren't enough. Meetings demanded punctuality, preparation, and compromise, skills she had largely ignored in her social life. Her initial attempts to dominate discussions were met with polite but firm resistance. Late one evening, as she stayed in the library long after everyone else had left, she reflected on her past behavior. The thrill of attention, the rush of bending others to her will, it all seemed trivial now. The consequences of thoughtless actions had finally caught up. She wrote in her journal, "Control is an illusion if it harms others. Respect is earned, not demanded." Romantic interests also tested her resolve. A classmate, Tom, had been courting her with a mixture of humor and attentiveness, a stark contrast to the chaotic attractions she once pursued. Initially, Lucinda felt the old pull toward impulsive desire. She had learned, however, to pause before acting, to question whether her actions served genuine connection or fleeting satisfaction. One evening, Tom invited her to a casual dinner. She hesitated, aware of the pattern she could easily slip into. But instead of rushing forward, she set boundaries. "I appreciate the invitation, Tom, but I'd like to focus on getting to know you first, without any pressure," she said. Tom smiled, impressed by her clarity and maturity. For the first time, Lucinda felt attraction coupled with respect, both for herself and the other person. Meanwhile, back at home, the dynamics with Kevin and Maria continued to shape her growth. Observing my parenting and the patience Maria showed helped Lucinda internalize the value of consistency, empathy, and accountability. She began volunteering to help Kevin with homework and small chores around the house, not out of obligation, but from a genuine desire to contribute. Lucinda's social circle began to change subtly. Friends who were only interested in gossip or drama drifted away, replaced by peers who valued integrity and mutual support. She started to enjoy the quiet satisfaction of earning respect rather than demanding it. A pivotal moment came when she received a letter from a former classmate she had wronged years ago. Initially, anxiety gripped her. Old patterns of avoidance whispered that confrontation would be easier than accountability. Instead, she drafted a heartfelt apology, acknowledging the harm she had caused and outlining the lessons she had learned. Sending it brought a surprising relief, a weight lifted that she hadn't realized she'd carried. By the start of the new semester, Lucinda's confidence had grown, though it was tempered with humility. She moved through campus with a quieter presence, less reliant on flashy appearances and more on thoughtful engagement. Yet the heart is seldom so easily disciplined, and new challenges tested the boundaries she had set for herself. Tom, her classmate and recent confidant, began to express deeper interest. Casual coffees turned into long conversations about ambitions, values, and family. Lucinda found herself drawn to his sincerity, but the memories of her past impulsiveness and her parents' chaotic example whispered caution. Could she truly navigate a romantic connection without repeating mistakes? One rainy evening, Tom invited her to a gallery opening. The dim lights and thoughtful paintings created an intimate atmosphere, the perfect backdrop for emotional revelation. As they wandered between canvases, Tom paused and looked at her directly. Lucinda, I like who you're becoming, he said softly. I know the past hasn't been easy, but I see the choices you're making, and it matters. Lucinda's chest tightened. The sincerity in his tone pierced through layers of self-doubt. I want to trust myself this time, she admitted quietly. I want to feel that connection without losing myself. Tom reached for her hand, gentle but firm. Then we take it one step at a time. No pressure, just honesty. Back at home, she carried this new perspective into her interactions with Kevin and Maria. Helping Kevin with his schoolwork became less a chore and more a shared joy. And she found that Maria's steady guidance and patience had created an environment where Lucinda could practice empathy without fear of judgment. Yet life was never without complication. A letter arrived from Scarlett's estate, a reminder that the past was never truly erased. Scarlett's father had written to confirm some unresolved financial matters, and although there was nothing punitive, the letter stirred old feelings, resentment, guilt, and curiosity about the woman Lucinda had once known only as an unstable figure in her father's tumultuous life. Lucinda took a long walk that evening, journal in hand. She reflected on her growth, the mistakes she had made, the pain she had endured, and the lessons she had learned. She realized that accountability was not just about facing consequences, but also about embracing the chance to build a better self. Tom remained a steady presence, offering respect and companionship rather than drama. When he asked her out for dinner the next evening, she responded with a confident smile. "Let's do it," she said. For the first time, she felt she could navigate romance with both desire and wisdom, curiosity and restraint. By the chapter's end, Lucinda stood at a personal crossroads. Her past remained a shadow, a cautionary tale she could not ignore, but her choices now were deliberate. She was learning that transformation was less about erasing one's history and more about understanding it, shaping it, and moving forward without losing integrity. The heart, she realized, could be courageous if guided by clarity, reflection, and patience. The early weeks of Lucinda and Tom's budding relationship carried a gentle rhythm. Walks through the city park, quiet dinners, and long talks over coffee became the foundation of their connection. Lucinda appreciated the absence of drama. Tom never pressed for declarations or rushed intimacy. Instead, he listened, reflected, and supported her gradual growth. But life has a way of testing even the most careful plans. One evening, as they returned from a gallery event, Lucinda received a call from her part-time employer. There had been a miscommunication with payroll, and she was facing a temporary financial shortfall. Though not catastrophic, the incident ignited anxiety she had thought she had outgrown. "I can handle this," she said, masking her worry when she rejoined Tom. He noticed the tension. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern in his eyes. Lucinda hesitated, then admitted, "It's just a small work issue. I'll sort it out." Tom offered a reassuring smile. "You don't have to face it alone. I can help if you want." His offer surprised her. She had spent so long learning to rely on herself that accepting help felt like vulnerability, yet it also felt like trust. Lucinda realized this was the essence of a healthy relationship, balance between independence and interdependence. That weekend, they went hiking in the nearby hills, the air crisp and the scenery expansive. As they walked along the trail, Tom spoke about his own past mistakes, moments where he had acted impulsively or without foresight. Lucinda listened, realizing that the strength of a relationship was not in perfection but in mutual understanding and accountability. Yet shadows from her past lingered. News arrived of Willow, who was struggling with her new job and mounting debt. Lucinda felt a pang of sympathy, but also knew she could not intervene too directly. She had learned the hard lesson of boundaries. Tom supported her reflection, reminding her, "You can care without taking responsibility for everyone else's mistakes." A pivotal moment came one evening when Lucinda received an unexpected visitor, Maria, who had become more than a mentor figure in her life. Maria's arrival was casual, but her presence carried weight. She shared news about Kevin, updates on her own life, and a gentle challenge. "Lucinda, you've come far, but don't forget to own your choices. Growth isn't just avoiding mistakes, it's learning from them." The conversation resonated deeply. Lucinda realized she had begun to internalize lessons about honesty, restraint, and thoughtful action. She was no longer reacting to circumstances, but actively shaping her path. The complexity of relationships, the intersection of past and present, and the responsibility toward herself and others became clear. By the chapter's close, Lucinda and Tom returned home, sharing a quiet dinner. The comfort between them was no longer tentative, it was deliberate. They spoke about their aspirations, their fears, and the delicate art of balancing freedom with commitment. Lucinda felt a sense of peace she had not known in years, a clarity that, while challenges would arise, she now possessed the tools to navigate them wisely. The calm Lucinda and Tom had cultivated was fragile, and life, as always, seemed determined to test it. One Thursday evening, as Lucinda returned from work, she found a letter slipped under her apartment door. The envelope was plain, but the handwriting struck a chord of unease, familiar and formal, a reminder of an era she thought she had left behind. Inside was a notice from a former acquaintance connected to her previous life, the world she had fled when she left her old marriage behind. They were pursuing some unresolved matter, a dispute over shared property and old debts. Lucinda's chest tightened as she read the words, each sentence a reminder that her past could still intrude, regardless of how carefully she had moved forward. Tom noticed her tension immediately. "What is it?" he asked, setting aside the papers he had been sorting. Lucinda explained cautiously, her voice low. "It's from someone I knew before long ago. They're claiming some old financial obligations. I didn't expect this." Tom listened quietly, then placed a steadying hand on hers. "We'll handle it together," he said. "You're not alone in this." The reassurance was simple but powerful. Lucinda felt the weight of his presence, realizing that trust was no longer theoretical, it was tangible. Over the next week, they worked to address the claims. Lucinda contacted legal counsel, gathering documents and statements, while Tom provided practical support, helping organize her financial records and creating a plan to resolve the matter efficiently. Each step strengthened the sense of partnership between them, reinforcing the idea that relationships were as much about shared burdens as shared joys. But the intrusion of the past also unearthed old memories, regret, self-doubt, and a flicker of anger at the mistakes she had made. Lucinda confronted these feelings in quiet moments, journaling her thoughts and discussing them openly with Tom. He listened without judgment, offering perspective when her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Lucinda reflected aloud. "I never imagined my past could come back like this. I thought I had closed the door completely." Tom nodded. "Past experiences shape us, but they don't define the future. You're taking control now, and that's what matters." As the days passed, Lucinda noticed subtle shifts in her confidence. She no longer reacted impulsively to every disturbance, but approached challenges methodically. Tom became a sounding board, a partner, and sometimes a mirror reflecting the growth she didn't always recognize in herself. The chapter closed with a sense of cautious optimism. While shadows of the past loomed, Lucinda felt better equipped to face them, anchored by the trust she had built with Tom and by her own emerging strength. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, she felt capable of navigating it with clarity and composure. Life had settled into a rhythm for Lucinda and Tom, but peace is often deceptive. One late afternoon, a knock echoed through their apartment. Tom opened the door to find a woman standing there, elegantly dressed, composed, but with an unmistakable intensity in her eyes. She introduced herself as Eleanor, a former business partner from Tom's past. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced," Eleanor said, her tone polite yet firm. "There's something we need to discuss about a joint project from years ago." Lucinda's pulse quickened. The name and presence triggered memories she hadn't yet fully unraveled. Competition, betrayal, and a sense that Tom had always held back pieces of his past. Tom gestured for her to come in. "Of course, Eleanor. Let's sit and talk." Lucinda remained nearby, wary but composed, feeling the undercurrent of tension between them. Eleanor wasted no time. "Tom, I've been reviewing the old agreements, and it appears there are discrepancies. Significant ones. I need clarification before taking any further steps." Her gaze flicked toward Lucinda. "And I assume you're aware of her?" Tom cleared his throat, steady. "Yes. Lucinda, meet Eleanor. This is someone from my past, a business associate. Eleanor, this is my partner, Lucinda." The introduction was civil, but the air between them crackled with unspoken history. Lucinda noticed subtle cues, the way Eleanor's eyes lingered on Tom, the slight smirk that suggested familiarity beyond mere business. She stayed silent, observing, absorbing, and silently cataloging every gesture. The conversation quickly turned technical, discussing contracts, timelines, and financial responsibilities. Eleanor's assertiveness was formidable, but Tom matched her every point with clarity and calm, demonstrating both competence and control. Lucinda felt a flicker of pride in him, tempered with unease. His past, once hidden, now intersected with their present. After an hour, Eleanor leaned back, studying both of them. It seems everything is in order. My apologies for any alarm. Tom, I trust you'll ensure the records are correct. Lucinda, you have my respect. She left as abruptly as she had arrived, leaving a quiet tension lingering in the apartment. Lucinda exhaled, a mixture of relief and curiosity bubbling within her. That was intense, she said. Tom nodded. It's a reminder that past actions have consequences, he said. People from old chapters don't always disappear. They sometimes resurface unexpectedly. Lucinda considered this. She realized that just as she had faced her own past, Tom had a history that could touch their present at any moment. It reinforced the fragility of trust, the importance of communication, and the reality that building a future together required constant vigilance. That night, as they shared dinner, their conversation turned toward their own plans and dreams. They spoke of Kevin, of moving into a larger home, and of creating traditions that belonged to them alone. The shadows of old flames remained, but Lucinda felt a renewed sense of partnership and resilience. The following week started like any other, calm and ordered, but tension often arrives unannounced. A letter slipped under the apartment door caught Lucinda's attention. It was formal, stamped with a law firm's insignia. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the words. A legal dispute regarding a property in Tom's name, one that had been part of his past ventures. Tom, she said, handing him the envelope. This looks serious. He took it, reading through the dense legal jargon. His jaw tightened. It's from someone trying to claim part of an old investment, he explained. Nothing we can't handle, but it's going to take time and energy. Lucinda could feel the tension settle over them. Their life had been a careful construction, but the past wasn't done with him, or with them. Over the next few days, letters and emails arrived with increasing frequency. The sender was relentless, probing for weaknesses in Tom's business, attempting to sow discord in their personal lives. Lucinda noticed Tom staying later at his home office, meticulously responding to each communication. She admired his composure, but worried about the emotional toll. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Lucinda broached the subject. Tom, this is starting to feel personal, not just legal. Do you think they're trying to intimidate us? He nodded, eyes fixed on the city skyline beyond their window. It's possible. Some people never forgive, never forget. They want to see others fail if they can't have success themselves. Lucinda reached for his hand. Then we'll face it together. Whatever they throw at us, we handle it as a team. For the first time in weeks, Tom allowed himself a small smile. I'm glad you're here, he said quietly. I don't know how I'd do this without you. The next confrontation came faster than expected. A man claiming to be the representative of the opposing party appeared at their door, requesting an urgent discussion. Lucinda and Tom were cautious but agreed to speak. The man's tone was polite but edged with menace. Mr. Reynolds, Miss Harper, we simply want what is owed to our client. There's no need for conflict if arrangements are made. Tom's calm response masked his growing irritation. We'll review your documents and respond formally. But we won't be coerced into anything, and we certainly won't allow threats to influence our decisions. The man left, but the unease lingered. Lucinda knew this was only the beginning. Their private world had collided with someone else's unresolved grudges, and navigating it would require both strategy and patience. That night, as they shared a quiet dinner, Lucinda reflected on how quickly life could twist from serene to turbulent. Do you ever regret how open we were with our pasts? She asked softly. Tom shook his head. No. Hiding the truth only gives it power over you. Facing it together, honestly, directly, that's how we survive the storm. Lucinda nodded, drawing comfort from his words. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant stars, indifferent to the struggles of two people determined to protect the life they had built. The next morning, Lucinda awoke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently. Groggy, she reached for it and saw multiple notifications, texts, emails, even a few missed calls from an unknown number. Tom, already in the kitchen preparing coffee, glanced at her with a raised eyebrow. "Something tells me the storm isn't over," he said quietly. Lucinda showed him the messages. They were terse, demanding, and laced with a subtle threat. Payments overdue, deadlines missed, consequences if ignored. Whoever was behind this was meticulous and patient. "We have to be strategic," Tom said, setting the coffee on the counter. "Reacting emotionally will only make it worse." Lucinda nodded, swallowing her anxiety. She had grown accustomed to Tom's controlled demeanor, and she knew that for every measured response, there was an internal calculation she couldn't see. By noon, their first formal response had been drafted and sent. Tom's careful wording left no room for manipulation, outlining timelines, legal positions, and consequences for false claims. Lucinda watched him work, amazed at the precision, the quiet ruthlessness beneath the calm exterior. Yet, even as they handled the immediate threat, shadows from the past crept in. Tom's estranged daughter, Willow, had recently contacted him unexpectedly, seeking reconciliation. Her messages were polite but tinged with frustration and resentment. Lucinda watched as Tom read the texts, his expression unreadable. "She's asking to meet," he said finally, "but I don't know if I'm ready." Lucinda placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to be, but maybe meeting her could help close some old wounds." He sighed, the weight of decades pressing down. "I suppose so, but it has to be on my terms. I won't allow anyone to manipulate me or our lives." Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Willow, standing nervously on the porch. She looked older, more composed than when he last saw her, but the tension in her posture betrayed anxiety. "Dad," she began cautiously, "I wanted to apologize for how things went, and maybe understand why you acted the way you did back then." Tom studied her, the stoicism in his posture unyielding. "You already know the consequences of your choices," he said evenly. "But I suppose hearing my side won't hurt." They sat in the living room, and Tom began recounting the years since the open marriage debacle, the legal maneuvers, the emotional distance, the rebuilding of his life with Lucinda and Kevin. Willow listened quietly, absorbing each detail. There was surprise, perhaps even guilt, in her eyes, but no immediate forgiveness. Lucinda observed silently, knowing that this meeting was as much for Tom as it was for Willow. Bridges could not be rebuilt overnight, but understanding the truth was the first step. As the evening shadows stretched across the room, Willow finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't understand. I thought I was helping, but I see now I only caused more pain." Tom nodded, a flicker of satisfaction passing through his calm exterior. Understanding is different from excusing, but it's a start. After Willow left, Lucinda turned to Tom. "Do you feel any lighter?" He exhaled slowly, gazing at the dimmed city lights. "A little, but the past is never fully gone. It only reshapes and is something we can manage." Lucinda smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "Then let's manage it together." The following week, Tom returned to his office, the city skyline gleaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally, he would have relished the control of his domain, the steady rhythm of deals and negotiations. But today, there was a tension he couldn't ignore. Emails flagged in red greeted him immediately. Anonymous threats, veiled warnings, and hints that competitors knew more about his personal life than they should. The open marriage scandal, though years old, had left subtle ripples, whispers among colleagues, opportunists waiting for a weakness. Lucinda entered with a folder in hand. "I've compiled a list of the potential threats. Some are business rivals, others seem opportunistic, hoping to exploit personal history. We need a plan." Tom leaned back, fingers steepled. "They think they can intimidate me. They underestimate how prepared I've become." He opened the first email aloud. "If you don't step down quietly, everything you built will crumble." Lucinda frowned, noting the familiar tactics: fear, manipulation, and attempts to destabilize him emotionally. Tom's mind immediately switched into strategy mode. "We respond by closing ranks. Legal, communications, security. No public statements until we know the scope." Let them feel uncertainty. They feed off it. Lucinda nodded, impressed by the calm precision. And Maria and Kevin? They stay out of this. Absolutely. His gaze hardened. They're my shield, not my leverage. Later that afternoon, a meeting with the senior management team revealed the extent of the brewing storm. A hostile takeover attempt was quietly underway, and some board members were rumored to be considering alliances with rivals. Tom addressed them with unwavering authority. You've all been briefed. This company doesn't bend to threats, and neither do I. Any collaboration with outside forces will be seen as a betrayal. Loyalty is rewarded. Disloyalty will be met with consequences. The room was silent, a mixture of respect and fear in the air. Tom could sense the shift, the realization that he was no longer just a man reacting to circumstance. He had become an immovable force. As the day ended, he returned home to Lucinda, Kevin waiting with sketches sprawled across the living room floor. Kevin looked up, bright-eyed. "Dad, can I show you my new drawing?" Tom smiled, the tension of the day easing slightly. "Of course, champ. Show me." Kevin proudly displayed his creation, a chaotic blend of color, motion, and imagination. Lucinda watched Tom's expression soften, a brief glimpse of the man he had been before the storms, before betrayal and revenge shaped him into something colder, sharper. "That's incredible, Kevin," Tom said, ruffling his son's hair. "You've got a real talent." Lucinda leaned against him, whispering, "Even in chaos, you find balance." He nodded, taking a deep breath. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent to the battles within boardrooms and homes. But inside, Tom knew that preparation, patience, and strategic foresight would keep him, and those he loved, one step ahead of the shadows. It was a quiet Saturday morning. Kevin was sprawled on the living room carpet, building a miniature city out of blocks, while Lucinda sipped coffee by the window. Tom had intended to enjoy the calm, but his instincts wouldn't allow him full peace. A sharp knock at the door made him tense immediately. He walked over, hand on the doorknob, and peered through the peephole. A man in a sharply tailored suit stood there, briefcase in hand, smiling in a way that seemed rehearsed. Tom's brow furrowed. "Who is it?" Lucinda asked. "I don't know," he replied, opening the door slightly. "Yes? Can I help you?" The man's smile widened. "Mr. Richardson, I presume? I'm an attorney. I've been retained on behalf of someone who has concerns regarding your family arrangements." Tom's jaw tightened. "Family arrangements?" "Yes. Your former wife, Scarlett, has made claims that may affect your estate planning, and your daughter, Willow, might be involved." The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the window, where Kevin was playing. "I assure you, it's in everyone's best interest to discuss this calmly and privately." Tom's hand didn't falter. "She's been gone for years. You're wasting my time." The lawyer's smile hardened slightly. "I think you underestimate the persistence of old wounds, Mr. Richardson. Scarlett's advisors want you to know they're watching the estate closely, especially after your remarriage." Tom's cold glare didn't waver. "There's nothing to discuss. My current wife and child are protected. Everything else is irrelevant. You're welcome to leave now before I call security." The man's expression didn't change, but he closed his briefcase. "Very well. But consider this a warning. Past choices have consequences, even after years of separation. I suggest prudence." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the heavy echo of his footsteps behind. Tom closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. Lucinda stepped closer, hand on his arm. "You handled that well," she said softly. "Handled it." Tom's voice was low, measured. "That was an opening gambit. They're testing boundaries, looking for any crack. They won't stop until they find one." Lucinda frowned. "Are you worried about Maria and Kevin?" "Always," he admitted. "But they won't touch them. Not if I can prevent it." The rest of the day passed in a tense haze. Every call, every knock, every unexpected visitor made Tom's mind race. That evening, he and Lucinda discussed security measures, legal contingencies, and even hypothetical scenarios for how Scarlett, or Willow, might attempt to interfere. Kevin, blissfully unaware, asked for a bedtime story about knights defending a castle. Tom smiled faintly. "We'll call it The Guardians of the Citadel," he said, tucking Kevin in. "The knights protect their family at all costs." As he left Kevin's room, Lucinda followed. "You know," she said, "you're still capable of being ruthless when necessary. But maybe Don't let it consume you entirely. Not for them, for yourself. Tom nodded slowly. I know, but vigilance is part of the price. Especially when people believe they can take what's yours because they think the past is forgotten. He stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Shadows stretched across the streets, silent and unrelenting. He knew this was only the beginning. The ghosts of Scarlett and Willow's choices were never far behind, and Tom Richardson intended to meet them head-on, fully prepared, no matter how long it took. After Scarlett's confession about her illness, a tense silence hung over the house. I remained stoic, refusing to allow my emotions to dictate my actions, as my father had drilled into me all those years. Scarlett, once the vibrant woman I had loved, was now diminished, hollowed by choices she made and the consequences she refused to foresee. The disease she contracted was treatable, but the humiliation and the emotional chaos were irreversible. She tried to meet my gaze, seeking some flicker of pity or consolation. I gave none. This was the result of her decision, her insistence on an open marriage, and her blind pursuit of freedom without accountability. I retreated to my office, shutting the door with a deliberate click. Outside, the world went on, oblivious to the crumbling domestic empire within the walls of my home. Maria had been a revelation, intelligent, composed, and surprisingly unflinching in the face of the chaos I'd brought her into. She had accepted my invitation to step into a life tangled with betrayal, and instead of recoiling, she had engaged, her wit and warmth breaking through years of accumulated cynicism. I couldn't help but admire her, even as I reminded myself to maintain boundaries. Yet, for the first time in years, I felt a pulse of normalcy, a heartbeat not tethered to Scarlett's manipulations or Willow's endless moral commentary. I returned home later that evening to find Scarlett lying across the couch, her form fragile under the soft glow of the living room lamps. She had attempted to occupy herself with mindless television, but the effort seemed futile. Her gaze met mine as I entered, eyes searching for something I refused to offer: forgiveness. Jonathan, she whispered, voice fragile. I just wanted some acknowledgement, some understanding. I didn't respond. Instead, I removed my coat, nodded to Maria's absence, and went upstairs. My mind was focused on a single principle: control what I could, accept the consequences of the rest, and ensure my son would grow up in an environment not corrupted by the recklessness of his mother. Willow had vanished for days at a time, sometimes returning with tear-streaked cheeks, sometimes absent for stretches I didn't track. Her life, I realized, was now her responsibility. The post-nuptial agreement and the uncompromising boundaries I had set weren't merely acts of retribution, they were lessons in personal accountability. I had allowed Scarlett to flout the very rules that governed our lives, and now Willow would see that choices bear consequences. Maria and I continued to navigate our unconventional relationship. Her pregnancy was a turning point, a tangible creation from a bond that had begun in defiance but matured into respect and affection. Kevin's birth brought a kind of serene intensity into my life, a focus I hadn't experienced in decades. The small apartment we rented nearby allowed for privacy and stability, and Maria adjusted seamlessly, her professionalism blending with her maternal instincts. Each day, I found myself less haunted by Scarlett's shadow and more invested in the possibility of building something meaningful, something lasting. Work, which had previously consumed me, became secondary. Delegating responsibilities to trusted managers, I created a buffer of security and efficiency, ensuring the company thrived without constant oversight. I realized that control over my professional life allowed me the freedom to shape my personal life deliberately rather than reactively. Despite her initial defiance, Scarlett's health deteriorated. Visits to the hospital became frequent, her vitality waning under the weight of her choices and the consequences of her indiscretions. When she reached out sporadically, I maintained my distance, providing only necessary guidance for emergencies. The emotional distance was deliberate: less punishment, more preservation of my own life and the environment I was now building for Kevin. She called one evening, voice barely audible, trembling with exhaustion. Jonathan, I need help. I listened, measured, refusing to be drawn into old patterns. Call your family, Scarlett, or a medical professional. I cannot, will not, intervene for your past mistakes. Focus on your recovery. She cried silently on the other end, and I hung up. No words of comfort followed. None were warranted. Accountability, not sentiment, had become the governing principle. Willow, eventually forced into independence, began to find her footing. The fast food job she had taken initially as a stopgap became a lesson in self-sufficiency. Small victories, a paid bill, a consistent paycheck, a completed project, slowly built her confidence. Through sparse updates, I learned she had moved into a small studio apartment, continuing to reconcile the freedom she demanded in youth with the responsibilities of adulthood. I allowed this distance, recognizing that my previous indulgence had only prolonged her entitlement. When she finally called, tentative and careful, I listened. She had learned, painfully and slowly, the cost of ignoring responsibility. I offered measured advice, withheld judgment, and let her chart her own course. The rift that had defined our household for years was narrowing, not through reconciliation, but through maturation and acceptance. Years passed. Maria and I grew together, Kevin thriving in a home of stability and love. Scarlett, having never regained the health or vitality she once possessed, receded from my life entirely. Her presence became a memory, a cautionary tale of what happens when choices are made without foresight. Willow, now independent, occasionally sent updates, not for my approval, but as acknowledgement that she had survived and learned. One quiet morning, the phone rang. Scarlett's father informed me that she had passed away. The news was a shock, yet tempered by years of estrangement and the knowledge of inevitability. I spoke briefly, expressing only the necessary courtesies. The grief that might have been raw was muted, absorbed into a life that had already moved forward. Maria and I focused on raising Kevin, nurturing the stability and love that had been absent in my first marriage's final years. Work continued, but no longer as a consuming force, rather, as a means to provide security and freedom for the life we were building. Travel, quiet weekends, shared meals, and the rhythm of everyday domestic life grounded us. The lessons of betrayal, manipulation, and consequence remained present, but they were no longer controlling forces. Willow's sporadic presence served as a reminder of past chaos, yet her independence reflected the efficacy of hard boundaries. Scarlett's absence was both a wound and a relief, a duality I acknowledged but did not dwell upon. Life, in its quiet way, had reset itself. In moments of solitude, I reflected on the cascade of choices, betrayals, and resolutions that had defined the last decade. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Emotions are liabilities, control is power. Yet, unlike him, I had tempered the lessons of control with an understanding of nurture and creation. Kevin represented not only new life, but a chance to apply what had been learned without repeating the past. Maria's presence reminded me that connection, when paired with boundaries, could be both fulfilling and safe. The mistakes of Scarlett and the missteps of Willow had shaped the terrain, but they no longer dictated my path. Life was measured in consequence, yes, but also in deliberate choices and careful cultivation of what mattered. As Kevin played with his toys and Maria sipped coffee by the window, I felt the weight of past chaos lift incrementally. There was no grand vengeance to celebrate, no final retribution required. The story of betrayal, open marriage, and STDs had run its course. What remained was a family rebuilt on deliberate foundations, tempered by lessons hard learned. The past existed, indelible and instructive, but it no longer held dominion. I ruffled Kevin's hair, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. "Ready for school?" I asked. He nodded, eyes bright. Maria reached for my hand, our fingers entwined in quiet affirmation. We had weathered storms, and now, in the calm aftermath, life felt steady, purposeful, and above all, ours. The echoes of Scarlett and the turbulence of the open marriage faded, leaving behind a single, immutable truth. Life is what you build after the chaos, not what you endure within it. And for the first time in decades, I could truly say I had done exactly that.